Hello everyone, this is Jason from Primetime Aquatics, and today we're going to be doing something that a lot of people have asked for, and that is how do we maintain all of these fish tanks. We got 55 in the house, 5 upstairs, 50 down here in the basement, and so we're going to take you through what we do down here to maintain the 50 tanks that we have. So stay tuned. Alright everyone, so we've got this side of the fish room to clean. I'm going to take you around, show you what we do, but we're ready to start. Alright, so let me show you what we're going to do. In this cleaning, this is our Saturday cleaning. We've got these two 75s that we have to clean. Eli's starting to work on the 55s. We've got the 20s and the 29s there. And then Luke is starting on the 9, 10-gallon tanks. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the 75s. You can see here, let me just show you how our wastewater system works. So Eli is starting the hose on that top 75, and yes, we do gravel vac most of the tanks, unless you've got something like this 29 down here that's got a lot of plants, not really necessary, or this 20 long here. But if it doesn't have a lot of plants, or really any plants, then yes, they get gravel vac. So that hose is running right there, and so we've got that piece of PVC sticking out, and there is actually PVC that runs all around the perimeter of the room. And I've shown you before how we assemble that when I've gone through and built out this side of the fish room, so you could certainly check out those older videos of us adding the 75s, the 55s, the 20 longs. So it starts here, wraps around, you can see the holes drilled in, and those holes are big enough so that we can fit our hoses in. And so we can see here, the nice thing is, once Eli gets this side gravel vac, or on that 55, he can then grab another hose and start another tank while this one continues to drain. And then Luke is doing the same thing over here, and the PVC actually runs behind the tanks, and there's a little part that sticks up where we can put the hoses in. So you can see Luke's over there, he's got his thing going, and he's already starting to drain tanks. So I'm going to go ahead and get started on the 75s. We will check back once we've got most of these tanks drained to the level that we think is appropriate. So on this top 75, I just gravel vac the left hand side of the tank. You got the hose coming out, and it is emptying into that bottom PVC, and that's going to go ahead and run all around the perimeter of our room into the floor drain on the other side of that wall over there. You can see Eli is getting close to being done with this 55. It's going to come down about another inch or so. We like to do about a 40% water change on that tank. This tank usually gets about a 30 to 40% water change here. In most of the tanks that we have, the planted tanks, we don't do as much, like that Bolivian ram tank and this bottom 29, because there are plants, because we have a lot of guppy grass in these, this tank over here with the plecos, and the one on the left, we've got the hornwort. Those we can easily get away with doing a 20% water change. We usually do that about once a week. So that's kind of what we do. The 10s, for the most part, depending on the stocking levels, are going to get somewhere between a 25 and a 30% water change. If it's really heavily stocked, then it might get a 50% water change if we've got a lot of fry in some of those tanks. But we do this once a week. Like I said, this is our Saturday cleaning ritual. Now, if I come back a little bit, you may ask why the 150 is not part of our Saturday water change scheme, and that's because we don't have enough hot water to change out the volume of water we need to change for all these tanks. So this one is actually part of our Tuesday schedule, and that's what keeps, that way we can empty about the same volume of water 3 days a week. So you can see Eli now is starting on the bottom 55. His challenge is going to be, and he does a really good job with it, he's got to get the sand clean. And again, this Nat Geo sand, I did the sand, Nat Geo sand versus pool filter sand video. I will put a link in that to the description. We talk about the advantages of Nat Geo sand, but if I'm going to move around the other side of Eli, why don't you go ahead and just go ahead and put that gravel vac right in there. And you can see the sand itself is not coming up. The stuff in the sand is, but the sand is too heavy to gravel vac out. Now again, a lot of this has to do with suction. If you had a lot of suction and you had like a tank that was on a 3rd level and the water was really coming down hard, maybe some of that sand would get sucked up, but for what we do, it won't be. So you can see here the sand stays down. So the other thing that we do on Saturdays, almost forgot, is we do both of the bristlenose tanks. Now that we've got the Super Reds breeding and they just released a second batch of fry, that tank is going to become more heavily stocked. It's getting fed more heavily. So that is now going to move up from a once a week tank to at least a twice a week tank. And over here we have our regular bristlenose, albino and brown bristlenose breeding 20 long. And that tank is also really, it's pretty heavily stocked. There are a number of adults in there. We get fry out of that tank, so it's important to keep the water quality up. Right now it's cloudy because Eli's kind of stirring some stuff up as we go, but that tank usually gets done at least 50% twice a week, sometimes 3 times a week, just to keep, I mean, if you're going to have a heavily stocked tank where you've got, 8 or 10 adult bristlenose along with anywhere between 20 to 40 babies at any time, that's a lot of fish in a 20-gallon tank, so we got to make sure that we keep the water quality up. We've also got a lot of jungle val in there, and of course the inevitable duckweed in our fish room that helps keep water parameters in line as well. Alright, so it looks like we got everything emptied to the point where we need them. You can see the extent to which we empty the 10-gallon tank, so somewhere in the 25-ish to 30% water change. Over here we've got these tanks, again, 4 of the 6 are planted or have plants, so we don't have to do very extreme water changes here, so somewhere in that 20-25% for the ones that have the plants, a little bit more for the ones that don't. Then we've got the 255s that got about a 25-30%, and then the same thing with the 275. So now we are ready to start filling with water. And normally we would be filling these things already, but just for the sake of the video, to kind of make it a little bit more manageable, we're going to fill after everything is emptied. So normally by now we'd have a few of these tanks already done. So this is the hose that we use. It just hooks right onto the tank and it just comes straight from our sink. And then Luke's going to go through, and what he does, he uses Seachem Safe, and it's a powder, and it goes real fast. He'll dump the powder in each one of the tanks before we start filling, and we'll be ready to go. And you don't need a lot of that stuff. Alright, so this is kind of how we get the water filled up. We got Eli checking to make sure the water level is correct. Luke is back at the sink, and Eli's going to call out his thing here in a minute. This is how we don't overflow.
Get ready. Okay.
So that's what they do. That's their system. I don't have a dial on the hose, so I probably should put some type of a valve on the hose so we can just kind of shut it off from here, but it's pretty high pressure, so I kind of avoided that for that reason. I didn't want high pressure water in this little 1/2-inch hose. So Eli calls it out, Luke turns the water on and off from the sink, and we've just got that tank and this bottom 29, and then we've got the 55 and 75 left to go, and we will be done, and I'll come back to it when we're finished. Alright everybody, so this is the end. We got all the 10s done, the 20s, the 29s, the 55s, and the 275s. Okay, so for our Tuesday cleaning, we got to get this bad boy done, the 150, and then we're going to come on over here and we get this side of the fish room done. So that includes the 440s on the back, the 50-gallon lowboy, those 220s, the 420s on that wall, these 3 10s, and then we also have, if we kind of pan around, we have the 23-gallon bow front and the 37. So that's what we're getting done today. Hopefully it takes us about an hour and 15 minutes. So the 150 is started. I already did some gravel vacuuming on the left-hand side. That hose is emptying right there into that PVC, which runs around the perimeter of the room and goes into a floor drain on the other side of that wall. Now, as we come in here, the boys are starting their job. Eli's over here. He just gravel vacked that bow front, so we've got that running directly into the sink. And then Luke is over there working on the electric blue Acara tank, doing a little bit of gravel vacuuming. That hose runs into this PVC, which goes around the room and then into a floor drain on the other side of the sink over there. Okay, so things are moving along. I've got yet another hose started on that bristlenose tank. The bristlenose tanks are going to get at least a 50% water change. That one on the left, I had to clean the sponge filter because it was ready to be cleaned, which is why it's all cloudy right now. The 40s are moving along pretty well. Over here, Eli has got those tanks done, and he's going to be starting on the 20s here in a second. All right, so that's about the extent that we do the 150. Sometimes we'll do a little bit more, sometimes a little less, but we did about a 35-ish, 40% water change there. As we come in over here, Eli is using a bucket this time around just because we are out of hoses. And he's doing the 20s, the low boy's getting done. We have 140 left to do. Luke's working on that Nanakara tank. We have 120 left to do. So it's been about 25 minutes or so since I last updated everybody on how things were going. So all we've got to do is that 20 over there, the 20 over here, that 40. But while we're waiting, I am going to go ahead and start filling tanks just to keep this thing moving along. So we also did some sponge filters. I cleaned the sponge filters on the 40s and most of them on the 20s over here just to keep those things maintained. And this is how we add the water in. So we've got the hose just kind of hooked on. I made this out of 3/4 inch PVC, put a joint in there and a little elbow, and then I've got this Y fitting here that kind of spreads the water out so it's not just hitting the gravel. And we just run it like this, and then we turn it off at the sink. So you want to see a messy fish room? This is what the fish room looks like when we are in the middle of cleaning. We've got buckets, we've got hoses, we've got kids and towels and water on the floor. We've got lids all over the place. This is what our fish room looks like when we're in the middle of making these things, the tanks, maintaining the tanks. So, well, usually we try to make it look pretty nice. Cleaning nights, it's a mess, and then we get it all cleaned up, and we'll show you that as soon as we get these tanks finished. All right, so all of the tanks are emptied. You can see about what we're doing in terms of percentage on the 40, somewhere around 25-30%. The tanks with a lot of plants and not very heavily stocked, they might get 25%, like these two 20s down here. Low boy, you know, somewhere around a 20-ish, 25% there. And so you can kind of see where we're at in terms of how much we empty out. Next step is to get them all filled up. We'll come back when they're done. All right, everyone, so it looks like we are done. Everything is filled. We've got the floor clean like it normally is. Hoses and buckets are put away. All of the tanks are done. We did a lot of sponge filters. We got everything filled up again. So all in all, we did those 440s in the back, the low boy and the 220s on the right over here. We did those 420 longs. We did the 310s. And then we come over here, we did the 37, the 23 bow front, and then we also have the 150 that was done. So we got it done. It took a little bit longer just because we were filming, and we normally fill tanks as we're emptying them. So it normally takes us about an hour and 15 minutes to get those tanks done. So this is the plan for this day. It's our Thursday cleaning. We've got the 333 longs and the 240s that we do on this side. You can see the hose kind of hooked up back there. We're going to get started on that pretty soon. And then as we come in here, the boys are starting to work on their tanks, and so Eli gets started on the 125, and he's going to do about a 50% water change on that. He'll straighten out the gravel. He'll do all the gravel vacuuming of all three sections. Meanwhile, Luke is going to go ahead and get the 275s going, and again, the goal here is to get all that stuff off the substrate, which he does a really good job with. We'll also do those 240s on the left-hand side and the 20s down below on the left-hand side. And so that's kind of our Thursday cleaning. And just like in the other cleanings, we have the PVC going around the room, and so you can see over here we've got a hose going in over there, and there's another space on the other side to get this one going as well. So we're going to go ahead and start getting these tanks clean, and we'll check back in a little while. Alright, so on this side of the room we are almost done with the water changes. We just have a little bit more to go on that bottom tank, the Immaculate Pinnace tank. We've got Eli over here. Eli, what are you doing?
Getting done cleaning.
You're doing duckweed. How do you feel about duckweed?
It's my nemesis.
Duckweed is your nemesis?
Yeah.
Wow, you don't like it? Well, you're doing a great job. If we come on over here, we've got Luke hard at work. We've got our almost about 50% water change done in the Oscar tank, the bottom Red Empress tank, and then the top tank is getting done. Luke's over there working on the 40-gallon breeder, the slow slide tank over there. So we just have a few tanks left to do. The top Pleco tank that's up there, and then these two 20 gallons, and we will be pretty close to emptying out all the tanks. Now the one thing we would normally do is start filling tanks, but just for the sake of making this kind of like a step-by-step process, we're not doing that just yet. Okay, so now we're beginning the process of filling the tanks. We start with the 125, and like I said, usually we fill this one as soon as we empty it out, and that allows us to do the other stuff and get this done a little bit faster. So we're going to go ahead, we're starting to fill now, and we will see you again when everything is pretty much filled and ready to go. Alright, so this side of the fish room is done. We got all the tanks filled, ready to go. So this is done. As we come into the other side, I'll show you that in a minute. And this side is now done as well. So we got all the tanks filled up, including the 20s over there. And so that's pretty much our Thursday cleaning. Again, it takes about an hour to get this done when we are filling tanks at the same time as emptying them. So alright everyone, so that's how we maintain the 50 tanks down here. It takes about an hour to an hour and 15 minutes, 3 days a week. Upstairs we have another 5 tanks. We do those about once every other week. They're small, they're planted, so it really doesn't take a lot of time. So if you like this video, share, subscribe, and we'll see you in the next one.